Welcome back to last exciting episode of our COP29 podcast series, where we bring global experts to discuss the most pressing issues on climate change, sustainability, and innovation. This podcast is brought to you in collaboration with Michigan State University and Impact Azerbaijan. I'm your host, Gulnara, in this episode. Today, we are honored to have Munir Mammadzade, the UNICEF Ukraine Country Representative, with us. Munir has extensive experience in advocating for children's rights and sustainability, particularly in the context of climate change and its impact on vulnerable communities. Under his leadership, UNICEF Ukraine has been at the forefront of addressing the intersection between climate change, health, and the well-being of children in Ukraine, especially in light of the ongoing challenges the country faces. In this episode, we will discuss the topic Post-COP29 strategies, what comes next for sustainability, and how UNICEF has engaged in climate change activities in conflict-affected regions. Munir will share valuable insight into the role of UNICEF in shaping climate action and the involvement of youth and the importance of integrating children's needs into global climate policies. Munir Malim, nice to see you again.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you for having me.
As UNICEF was actively involved in COP29 discussion in Baku, what are the key next steps that countries, especially those impacted by conflict, should prioritize to ensure sustainable development?
Thank you for the question. As you know, UNICEF played a significant role at COP29 in Baku, from where I'm joining you right now, advocating for child rights integration in global climate action. So there were key steps for countries, particularly those affected by conflict, that were identified. So let me mention just a few. I think first and foremost, I think one specific next step is to pay more attention to how climate change affects children. Because at COP29, we have heard reaffirmation that children are disproportionately affected. This is already known evidence. So particularly for conflict-affected countries like Ukraine, specific vulnerabilities include health issues because of the also coupled with conflict, of course, problems related to extreme weather conditions or extreme heat, air pollution. Of course, we have all witnessed school closures due to the COVID pandemic, but now in the context of Ukraine, it has been more than 3 years. Some of the schools are kept closed. Then it happens also due to disasters in different contexts. Displacement brings additional trauma that has to be systematically addressed. And as you know, globally, 88% of disease burden from climate change is borne by children under 5. So in other area, I believe we need to strengthen or focus as a next step is engage and involve children and adolescents and young people themselves. Because UNICEF leadership at COP29 highlighted also meaningful participation as an important element to that. And as an example, there is a declaration on children, youth, and climate action, which was co-hosted with the COP29 presidency, demonstrate the value of engaging young people in climate action. So countries should formalize structures for involving children and young people from different groups, including the most vulnerable. And they should be involved in the planning and monitoring responses to loss and damage and adaptation measures. Third point, I think allocation of resources is key to all the work being done, because we understand that without resources, we wouldn't be able to progress much, because right now there is less than 2.4% of climate finance addresses child-specific needs, while again, impact is huge. And therefore, UNICEF called for increased targeted financing at COP29. For conflict-affected areas, I think resources also must prioritize planning, preparedness, and recovery, focusing on children and new generation. Two more points on this specific question. I think looking at the safeguards that can be introduced, UNICEF advocated for strong social, environmental, and human rights safeguards in the use of loss and damage funds. So making sure that countries establish systems to track how funds not only spend, but also impact children, ensuring child-sensitive accountability framework. And final point is, I think we need to make sure that the right experts are around the table. So for COP29, it also emphasized the need to integrate child rights experts in climate plan, because generalization doesn't help here. Because of children's vulnerabilities, we need to have right experts around the table so that they can they can contribute to the planning and designing and updating all the measures. And therefore, UNICEF recommends this practice to be institutionalized in NDCs, so-called national determined contributions, but also national adaptation plan processes globally, but also at the local context.
How is the UNICEF contributing to the post-COP29 efforts in Ukraine, and what strategies are being implemented to promote sustainability within the country?
I hope with ongoing consideration, and hopefully, I mean, first and foremost, what children in Ukraine need is peace. And with upcoming conversation around ceasefire and long-lasting peace consideration, I believe we would be able to do much more than we have been able to do already. But right now, UNICEF Ukraine is actively mainstreaming environmental sustainability in alignment with global post-29 priorities. So one is around energy efficiency and environmental friendly infrastructure, because you need, and the audience have to understand that in Ukraine, we have many infrastructures became impacted or became dysfunctional due to the war. So we, as UNICEF, integrate sustainable solutions. For example, when we rehabilitate schools, support health facilities and social infrastructure in general. For example, when we invest in school infrastructure, when we try to build shelters or retrofit them, we also make sure that energy efficient systems and solar panels or other modern techniques that allow us to reduce carbon emission is coupled with resilience and service delivery and crucial kind of conflict affected areas in terms of infrastructure, because integrating energy efficiency and climate friendly interventions is becoming already a minimum standard. So it is integrated in everything we do. Another great example is, I think, water sector resilience. We, as UNICEF Ukraine, ensure sustainable water solution. It is key priority in the country right now. In 2024 alone, we supported resilient water system that benefited more than 5.6 million people, including 870,000 children, addressing conflict damage infrastructure and climate-induced water stress. Because, as you know, quite often energy, water infrastructure is being targeted in the context of Ukraine. We are also looking at, as I mentioned, leveraging renewable energy, because energy is major concern in the country. So solar powered system in healthcare facilities, for example, and water utilities, again, help us to improve operationally and ensure that there is a continuity despite conflict disruption. We also make sure that there is kind of scalable models, because right now, of course, in the context of humanitarian interventions, we are in a parallel as an agency that is both humanitarian and development mandated to cover both aspects. We're also looking at scalable models. So what we do is we pioneer in some of the interventions to help country to build back better and greener. Yeah, and therefore we help local actors to come up with efficient cogeneration units in heating sectors so that we can later on replicate examples across Ukraine's water and sanitation sector.
How do you think the role of young people will evolve in the post-COP29 sustainability movement, particularly in regions affected by war and instability like Ukraine?
I think youth participation is central to UNICEF work in general and child participation, of course. But it was also central to UNICEF's involvement at COP29. I think it was the so far most successful COP in terms of youth engagement because we have seen when young environmental leaders from Ukraine and many other parts of the world joined and contributing to this discussions. We also know that there are some regions beyond Ukraine, like in Central Asia, that define youth engagement as a cornerstone of all climate-related actions. When it comes to Ukraine, I think Ukrainian youth councils that we have in the country, even in conflict-affected regions, they're at the forefront of all the climate innovation and discussion. So they are participating in initiatives such as river cleanup campaign or climate smart agriculture or community-led green recovery projects. And on top of that, we also see that young people are advocating to address war-related pollutants because in addition to natural causes to climate degradations, war-related concerns include, there is increased chemical waste in the rivers and soil because of the munitions. You know that more than 25% of Ukraine land is contaminated by also mines. So this all affects also what is happening and what we see in context like Ukraine, and therefore young people are advocating for addressing it on the ground. So globally and locally, UNICEF support young people roles in shaping those policies and solutions post COP29.
Actually, as you mentioned, we observed that like during COP29, the UNICEF Ukraine delegation, especially like young people, were very actively participated in the events. And how do you see the future of youth engagement in climate change? What more can be done to amplify their voices in global policy discussion?
When I interact with these young people and engage with them, I'm getting more and more optimistic on what is ahead of us because UNICEF Ukraine deals or engage with young people continuously. But for particularly COP29, we supported a very dynamic youth delegation. And through direct engagement, the delegation they organized a dedicated event on Ukraine's rivers, engaging also government officials from Ukraine and beyond. It involved also directly Minister of Environment participating in that. So demonstrating that youth capacity to influence decision is key and already contributing to that work. And this is where I'm proud to say that based on our recommendation in Ukraine, Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources has established Youth Council under the ministry, and those young activists are now part of the formal structure. So it is not limited to COP, because we oftentimes see that youth participation is tokenistic or limited to such global forums, and what happens in between is very limited. But in Ukraine, we see already dedicated kind of political agenda and also political will to get young people involved across in such discussions so that young people can influence relevant decisions. But also through those kind of platforms, we're managing their contributions to global interactions. So members contributed from Ukraine, to the global youth statement at COP29, and there was Ukraine-specific policy submissions that again ensured young people perspectives, making sure that they integrated in international dialogue. So we have also, as UNICEF Ukraine Young People Advisory Board. So that board also help us in local advocacy and shaping youth involvement strategies moving forward. But what is important, as I mentioned, example of Ukraine can be useful to other contexts where institutionalization of young people engagement in national climate councils could be a model that can be taken forward. Scaling up digital platforms or eco-education efforts as reflected in Baku guiding principles on human development for climate resilience that was co-developed with UNICEF leadership can be way forward.
Post-COP29, how can international organizations like UNICEF collaborate with local communities and government to drive meaningful change in sustainability efforts?
Well, there are different ways to do that. I don't think there is a kind of a golden standard because each and every intervention has to be context specific, right? So, but as UNICEF, we apply multi-level approach to that. What is most important is that we move from global perspective to national, but also importantly, we need to go to a grassroots level. So municipal partnership plays a critical role. So we like working closely with municipalities, they're called gramadas in Ukraine, to integrate sustainability in all the social sector planning, like in health, education, child protection, water and sanitation services is a key. So local governance engagement enables that tailored or community-driven sustainability efforts where, again, young people and children themselves contribute to that process because they are not just a part of the problem, they are also part of the solution. What is key is also to engage private sector. In this area, we haven't been that successful because you can imagine at the time of the war, economically, country is already at very significant constraints financially. So that part requires further investment from our side, but public-private partnership is already happening. So we are, again, as I mentioned, installing solar system in the hospitals and schools. For instance, we have piloted systems covering up to 70% of energy needs in healthcare facilities. And this comes, of course, with the private sector engagement and involvement. What is key here also is ensure that young people, as I repeatedly mentioned, because there is nothing about young people should be done without young people themselves. So supporting civil society organization, youth councils, and local actors is key to that success formula and ownership and long-term impact, because today's young people are also tomorrow's decision makers.
How does UNICEF ensure that children's voices are included in climate negotiations, especially in discussions around adaptation and mitigation?
I think this COP29 involvement and what UNICEF did together with the member states and other partners demonstrated this commitment already in terms of child and youth ambassadors' participation. There were over 40 delegates globally, adolescent and young people, including from Ukraine, were supported to actively participate in COP itself. But also, as a part of the process, there's pre-COP national consultations that brought together hundreds and hundreds of young people to engage, and UNICEF facilitated also Youth Summit to prepare delegations for the conference. But also, as I mentioned earlier, there is this declaration that UNICEF is championing or promoting, advocating for, which is a declaration on children, youth, and climate action. So by now, if I'm not mistaken, it is signed by around 53 countries, including Ukraine. Ukraine signed it during COP28. But countries like Azerbaijan joined at the course of COP29. So it reflects UNICEF push to embed child rights in global climate policy. But what is important is also making sure that in addition to those measures taken, we need to also invest in education and skill building of new generation, because through behavioral campaigns, educational programs, and capacity building efforts, UNICEF is also ensuring that children are not only participate in that process, but also lead and contribute to that.
So we are coming to the end. So I have final question for you. Finally, what message would you like to share with individuals globally about their role in driving sustainability, particularly after COP29?
I think we talked about very, I would say, upstream or big interventions or policy actions. But what I wanted to highlight is that every small action, from reducing waste to conserving energy or saving water, has a cumulative global impact. So children and young people are agents of change. So they can already, through these small actions, demonstrate clear impact. And adults and leaders like ourselves, coming from international organizations or member state governments, should empower and engage them, ensuring their voices shape a sustainable but also just future for the new generations.
Thanks for sharing voices from Ukraine and for joining our last podcast episodes. We hope for peace in Ukraine soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.